essentially. Now, you have to do it carefully. You start off with the development land. You don't tax residential people first. You start off with the land banks of the developers and speculators. And that will make sure that they sell or develop. At the moment, they're closing up shop and going to Britain, to London, to build the Olympics. That's what they're doing. They can do this because developers don't have big overheads. They operate in some cases out of their car boot. They don't hire much of a staff. They can close in the morning, and that's what they're doing. But this will concentrate their minds. They'll have to pay essentially the cost of renting for the services that they are not using of the land that they've bought. So they'll have to develop or sell. And then we reform the rate system because the Chambers of Commerce have asked for reform of the rate system, essentially. So there are two things that I think can be done in fairly easily. And then we move on to second homes and rental property. These aren't essential, and they are completely untaxed, and we have in some cases huge numbers of second homes, and people can afford to pay. So we start with those. Only when we've done that do we move to the second year, and we abolish stamp duty, and you replace it with your annual land value tax. Now, what that does mostly, is take the tax off young couples who are struggling with heavy outgoings, and they put it on the likes of me. My house is paid for. I should be paying something. There's a huge majority of the country have bought their houses or are not highly indebted, who bought before 5 years ago and can afford to pay. This is the dig out we need. This has to be done. Now, those who bought in the last 4 to 5 years, they need help. They can't pay anymore. So essentially, they would not pay their tax, or that tax would reduce their income tax, essentially. And there'd be exemptions for hardship. In particular, older people could roll it up, not pay it if they're very old, and it'd be paid by their estate. There are many ways of dealing with the hardship cases. And indeed, with the rebate, it'll pull out a lot of the others who miss that particular safety nets. And then farmers, when you say the word land tax to them, they go red in their face and get very upset. But if you could just talk to them for 5 minutes, and I can go through the process. And farmers themselves were proposing a land tax in the 1980s. This is often forgotten. The ICMSA were suggesting a land tax because they were finding they couldn't buy land, and that is the case now. And people were hoarding it and not selling it. And the progressive farmers couldn't get land, and they suggested a land tax, but all that is forgotten now. But I would suggest to them that it should be optional. So we'd ask them to pay a land tax based on the value of the land. We have Griffith surveys, we have better surveys now on quality, right down to field scale. We know what the quality of land is and what its potential productivity is. And we offer them, okay, you can pay your income tax, and the income tax they pay is a fraction. They pay more to their accountants to prove that they don't need to pay income tax. So they fire their accountants, and with the money that they would have paid to their accountants and the income tax they would have paid, which is tiny, effectively that should be the start, the basis of the land tax. And I think most progressive farmers will go for that. And after 50% of farmers have bought into that system and we can see it working, then it should be extended to all of them. Now, some people would say that would mean that all farmland will be pushed into productive use, and we're going to lose parks, and we're going to lose our biodiversity and our wild places. And we're going to lose our fine buildings that we're going to demand rates on, essentially, or land value tax, meaning that they have to be renewed and extended, etc. No, that isn't the case. It's the highest permitted use that we collectively have said as a society we want for that land and for those buildings. So that protects those. And indeed, with the land tax, if you designate an area for no development, not even normal agricultural development, and because we think it's important for biodiversity and for cultural reasons, then that farmer should be compensated with a positive land tax, because it will be in receipts to do it. So, in the future then, going forward, this solves an immediate problem for the government. It brings in the shortfall money. It establishes a reliable income stream. It makes developers keep a certain amount of construction up, 45,000 per annum, roughly. It incentivises the refurbishment of existing buildings, and it takes pressure off small businesses who are paying rates essentially and want to expand and develop. All of that will stimulate the economy. It'll bring derelict sites into use. It'll make more property available at cheaper prices to people who want to start businesses. All of that is quite stimulatory to the economy. But it's not enough to give us back our share. To a certain extent, it is diverting money that would go to individual wealthy landowners and putting it into infrastructure projects which we need, because local authorities will have the money to clean the water, to do the proper waste treatment systems, waste to energy, waste to fertility, etc. They will be in the money for it, and local authorities will be made responsible for the spending of that money, and if they spend the money badly and it doesn't add value to the land, their receipts drop, people are very unhappy, they get voted out. At the moment, it doesn't matter what our councillors do, the money comes from the centre, they can rezone all they like, they can destroy the water quality, they don't have to pay for it. Urban dwellers in general have to pay for it for their taxes. So it makes local authorities responsible. It gets rid of the corruption in planning, because nobody will want to be zoned if they immediately have to start paying a tax which capitalises worth 60% of the value added. They will not want that until they're ready to develop, so they won't pressure politicians to overzone. All of that disappears, and we can at last have a representative and properly democratic local authority administration in this country, which we don't have at the moment because our government is afraid to give our councillors any more power. That's essentially it. We have to take the profit out of corruption, and that would do that.